Clair Obscur Expedition 33 isn't just a game, it's art. Not in the shallow, this is the best looking game ever made kind of way, I mean that this game is literally high art in video game form. Clair Obscur is a profound game that reaches for something deeper as it pulls you in with it, no matter what aspect of the game calls to you the most. Whether it's the brutal yet elegant Sekiro-style combat, the genes of a lost Final Fantasy, or the grief-soaked storytelling that echoes Shadow of the Colossus. Something about this game speaks to us on another level entirely. But how? What is this game actually doing beneath the surface? Underneath the stylish presentation, excellent gameplay, and meaningful storytelling, Clair Obscur fulfills this loop of human artistry that dates back to the very first time we laid ink on canvas. In order to understand what Clair Obscur is as a piece of art, we need to establish what the art style of Expedition 33 is, starting with the city of Lumiere, a melancholic town of genius, artistry, and emotional maturity. The people who live here are very familiar with the concept of death. For every sunrise they experience, they can't help but notice the doomsday clock that lies on the horizon, a number that erases anyone of that age and above. With this concept in mind, this is where the central art design of Clair Obscur blossoms, as it embodies a fantasy version of a late 19th century Belle Époque France, a period in European history characterized by optimism, enlightenment, romanticism, peace, economic prosperity, alongside technological, scientific, and cultural innovation. Beginning in 1871 and ending at the dawn of World War I, Belle Époque Europe is retroactively seen as one of the most beautiful times in human history. In fact, it directly translates from French to mean beautiful era. Clair Obscur utilizes this time period to contrast a hopeful environment of love and innovation with a sense of impending doom, one of the many contrasts the game explores. The artistic climate of France during the Belle Époque era flowered numerous masterpieces of literature, music, theater, and visual art. But the most prominent art style found within this era is Art Nouveau, a style of art with an emphasis on the fluidity of line, geometric forms, and asymmetrical composition. Art Nouveau represented a break from creative tradition that was exotic, extravagant, and holistically modern. It marks the first time artists deliberately made an attempt to make quote-unquote modern art, as they began to shun out the worn-out techniques of classical art and design. It was the dividing line between traditional fine arts and everyday life, as it was implemented into interior design, furniture, glass, textiles, ceramics, jewelry, and metal. It was made to unify and inspire anyone who came across it, so they could appreciate the beauty in nature despite being man-made. Similar to how Art Deco shaped a lot of the architecture and philosophy behind New York, Art Nouveau was radically popular in Paris. The movement's tendrils can be seen within the Paris Metro, the World Fairs, the Eiffel Tower, and the Lumiere Brothers cinema. You'd be blind to not see Art Nouveau in Clair Obscur. The city is named Lumiere, potentially in light of the Lumiere brothers, who had a major hand in pioneering the film and cinema experience during the Belle Époque era. The establishing shot of the game shows off an Eiffel Tower and a town fair, albeit in a more surrealist state of being. In the wake of World War I's devastation, artistic movements like Dada and later Surrealism emerged as a response to a shattered sense of reality. Surrealism can be defined as avant-garde depictions of the unconscious imagination projected onto a canvas, the world of dream and fantasy joined into the everyday rational world. Where Art Nouveau comes from a time of peace and harmony, Surrealism comes from a time all too familiar with never-ending fear and hardship, the light of a more optimistic normal past in stark contrast to a looming darkness. When we leave Lumiere to experience the rest of the continent, we are met with environments that range from strangely beautiful surrealist landscapes akin to a Vladimir Gush painting, and environments that embody more chilling aspects of the human subconscious, derived from works by Zdzisław Beksiński, who's known for horrifying art that induces dread and despair within the viewer, a similar feeling that Gustav feels when he first steps foot into this world. In fact, the game makes a deliberate effort to literally frame these surrealist environments at times, not only calling back to the fixed camera angles of classic JRPGs, but also classical works of landscape art created all throughout human history. On top of the environment, Sandfall also encapsulated something similar to Beksiński's twisted creature design, doom-laden beings with a whiff of lost humanity. Also reminiscent of the original surrealist Hieronymus Bosch, a 15th century Dutch painter known for his disturbing and nightmarish depictions of hell. Though centuries before the Surrealist movement, Bosch's dreamlike, disturbing imagery was ahead of the curve. His most famous piece, The Garden of Earthly Delights, illustrates his twisted imagination perfectly. Humanoid birds with moth wings, flying knives with ear wings, and whatever the fuck this thing is. Allegorical chimeras that each represent a vice, a perversion, or a punishment. Bosch possessed deep insight into humanity's greatest fears and desires, creating characters not as a creature, but as an idea. Enemies such as the Lampmaster, the Mask Keeper, or Serene aren't just painted for the sake of creation. They express fables or warnings to the expeditioners. They are a visual journey that lets you project a narrative upon them. The Lampmaster, trapped in a jail of darkness until light reawakens him. The Mask Keeper, a faceless character who houses himself behind thousands of masks. And Serene, a bewitching muse fallen from grace. It's no stretch to say that a good portion of the enemies within this game are made with explicit intention to evoke a certain theme, character, or emotionality. At the same time, it's important to recognize that not everything in this game has a deep meaning. In fact, most of the game is dominated by the almighty rule of cool. Why does the duelist have 4 arms, 2 swords, and bears a resemblance to the expeditioners? Because it's fucking sick, dude, that's why. This game ignites the imagination like no other because the designs are so unapologetically creative and mysterious just for the sake of creation. It's not all supposed to make sense. Why are most of the Nevrons in this game dressed to the nines in straight attire? Where could they possibly be buying Gucci and Prada? It's almost as if the clothing was given to them, like they are zipped up in costume to play a role in a production, which speaks to the filmic side of Clair Obscur, one of the most well-shot video games ever put to screen, which comes as no surprise since painters and cinematographers are cut from the same cloth. Like a true painting, Clair Obscur masterfully ties in all of its themes and influences together in a visual manner akin to a provocative film. A lot of what the game is trying to tell you is often left unsaid. In fact, some of the game's most impactful moments have no gameplay or dialogue at all. Just music, subjects, and a camera. Hey, it's me, the generic video essayist that needs a haircut. I'm a pro sleeper. I've been doing it since I was born, and let me tell you, I take sleep very seriously. I'll admit it, I'm a bit of a sleep snob, and if you aren't sleeping right, you're missing out big time. Enter Mantis Sleep, the company responsible for bestowing one of the most comfortable sleeping masks on the planet Earth. A mask potentially forged by the sleep gods themselves, now here on Earth for us mere mortals to enjoy the taboo luxury of premium sleep. The Mantis Sleep Mask is stupidly comfortable and remarkably effective at blocking out light. In fact, it's so good that there was literally one morning where I woke up and forgot the sun even existed. It's a fully adjustable, breathable, premium mask that is perfect for travel, stress, and obnoxious household environments. Products like the Manta Pro Sleep Mask provide reliable comfort. The Manta Silk Mask is very comfortable and easy on the skin. The Manta Weighted Mask is a therapeutic stress reliever, and the Manta Sound Sleep Mask is a guaranteed way to disassociate with reality. There's many different flavors of sleep here that will suit your specific needs. So if you're tired of being tired, get your Manta Sleep Mask today. Use code LANDO at checkout for 10% off. Thanks to Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching. Okay, you can go now. Okay, bye. Okay, shoo, you can get now. The prologue to Clair Obscur is one of the most elegant openings to a video game ever made. It almost doesn't make sense how well it works, all things considered. You're met with these characters you don't know anything about. You have a basic understanding of what they may be going through, but when the time comes to experience what the prologue has been building up to, it hits more than anyone would anticipate. But why? Well, great character writing, fantastic acting, very impactful music, but the key aspect that pulls all these elements together is excellent shot composition. By itself, this prologue carries like a fantastical short film. Now, for the uninitiated, composition is the art of arranging visuals within a frame to create an aesthetic impact. How the elements on screen or on canvas work in unison with one another to guide the eye and elicit an emotional response. So with the intro in mind, let's break down how the composition in Clair Obscur's prologue works. As a precursor to the Gommage, we control both Gustave and Sophie. The choice to play as Sophie allows us to put ourselves in the shoes of this character from a fairly intimate perspective, the classic over-the-shoulder third-person camera angle. This perspective is what Sandfall felt best served the gameplay, which in turn serves the narrative. It's no wonder why games with a cinematic edge often use this perspective. The creators want you to constantly look at the protagonist you are controlling, learn how they gesture and interact with the world. By having the camera so close to the character, it subconsciously gives you a unique attachment you otherwise wouldn't have if you were looking from a godlike isometric perspective, and even less so with an immersive first-person perspective. Through this gameplay, we are offered numerous optional objectives that gives us more insight into who these characters are. We come to understand that it has been some years since Sophie and Gustave have been together like this. We piece together bits of Sophie's life philosophy, and we even reserve some time to give these characters a little fun. But inevitably, we have to force these characters to their fate if we are to progress the story. And this is where Clair Obscur shines as absolute cinema. I'll be briefly doing a shot-by-shot breakdown, so bear with me here. The scene opens with a balanced shot of Sophie and Gustave. This balancing act between the two characters shows off the fact that at this moment, they finally work well with each other. They are experiencing the same event in the same location. It switches to a shot that shows you how small and powerless these characters feel at this very moment. The environment around us guides our eyes to the center of the image, where we see an imposing monolith in the distance, which reflects upon the water and in turn illuminating the silhouetted couple. We then switch to a close-up of Sophie in focus with a stoic expression. A restless Gustave is out of focus in the foreground. She's composed and in control of her emotions, but Gustave can't figure out what one thing to look at. The composition then begins to show off the power dynamics within the scene, and nothing demonstrates power more than size. The size of the subject should directly correlate to its importance within the scene. Sophie and Gustave are the important subjects here, but when the camera flips around to show us the monolith yet again, it appears bigger and more significant. It demands more attention. We then get this long, handheld 180-degree shot. In film, these shots traditionally create a sense of intensity while also highlighting the emotional tension of the characters. It emphasizes their isolation, their importance, or their internal conflict. The shot allows us to see Sophie's stoicism break for a moment as reality dawns on her, but the camera seems to want to focus on Gustave's disbelief before once again showing the very thing that is making these characters feel this way. It's important to recognize that this is a moment the two of them knew they were going to experience with each other. Sophie was always going to die first, and Gustave was going to have to face that reality. This emotionality is demonstrated through these close-ups that allow us to see these subtle nuances on their face. Sophie, who is forcing acceptance of her situation, and Gustave, who is beginning to boil with a stern anger. The camera now goes back to a wide shot, but this time with a larger, more demanding monolith at a tilted angle, subconsciously adding a level of discomfort as color escapes the scene. The scene transitions to an isolated shot. The paintress, the monolith, Sophie, and Gustave, all framed within a golden eclipse. The scene is empty. The negative void surrounding the subjects correlates to the hopelessness that the characters feel in this moment, and the rest speaks for itself.
I'm here.
This is the textbook definition of using excellent composition to serve your story. There's a science to the art, but composition is more than a technicality. It's an expression of an idea. It's a metaphor. It's a symbolism. It's what paintings have to rely on the most in order to create a good-looking picture. But it's one thing to make a good static picture. To make a good moving picture is another beast entirely, and to make a good moving picture that is interactive is downright black magic. The style of cinematography most closely related to Clair Obscur harkens back to the French's greatest contribution to film, French New Wave, a style of filmmaking that explores new approaches to editing, visual style, and narrative, as well as engagement of complex stories and naturalistic dialogue. Now stop me if this sounds familiar. French New Wave was created as a rejection of modern filmmaking. Rather than utilizing crazy budgets to create safe films with perfect lighting, cohesive editing, and general approachability, French New Wave is all about anti-establishment authenticity. It's low-budget passion projects that are seen as a personal expression and not as a product from a major studio. The movement gave voice to the voiceless. It proved that great films can be made outside of the studio system with extremely low budgets. All you need is a great vision. Expedition 33 embodies French New Wave films through the lens that they are often self-referential. The character or narrative beats occasionally make note of the process of creation, while also highlighting the moral ambiguity of the characters. Protagonists are not explicitly good nor evil, which brings attention to the game's main theme and title. Clair Obscur, light and dark. The term is French for chiaroscuro, an artistic technique that emphasizes strong contrasts between light and dark. Deep, dark, dramatic shadows, and strikingly detailed subjects illuminated by light, often with a golden hue. The technique began to develop in 15th century Renaissance Italy, but came into prominence when the late 16th to 17th century Italian painter Caravaggio took chiaroscuro to a new level entirely, with dramatic lighting and intense contrast, often illuminating only part of the figure while plunging the rest into darkness. Chiaroscuro is used to elicit a moody atmosphere, to inspire tragedy within the subject, a strange, macabre feeling that fits ever so eloquently within the story of Expedition 33. It's light that guides the eye to tell you what to pay attention to. Light manipulates emotion, it pursues progress, and it moves a story. Without light, there would be no composition, and without composition, there is no picture. Chiaroscuro was directly translated into film for the same purpose, and you'd be remiss to not see it within the game, especially within the nightmares of the game's true protagonist, Maël. Maël's nightmares are notable for many different technical reasons, one of which being the 4:3 aspect ratio that evokes a pre-digital, almost dreamlike vintage cinema, an eerie contrast to the vivid painterly realism of the game proper. It mirrors the French New Wave's fascination with form as a storytelling device, bending the rules of visual storytelling to evoke internal emotion. 4:3 feels more intimate. Paired with the unsettling composition and disjointed editing, we get a distinct separation from the rest of the game. However, the most distinguishing difference within these scenes is its black and white color grading, the most raw form of Clair and Obscur. So what does chiaroscuro do to warrant such a bold name for this game? Well, the obvious answer is a tale as old as time, light versus dark. But if you've played the game, you know as well as I do that it's not so simple. Yes, it's about light versus dark, but not about good versus evil. The narrative writer Jennifer Svedberg-Yen says as much in the behind-the-scenes interviews. The darkness comes from the themes, characters, and moments, but it's illuminated by the light of the environment, the exhilarating combat, and the human connection. But it also represents the nature of a journey. We begin in the city of Lumiere, which directly translates to light. In their last year of living, the expeditioners go into the dark, where they are often never heard from again. Clair Obscur, light, dark, Maël, and Verso. The story is a constant battle between the light of childhood innocence and the encroaching darkness of aging. It's a battle between the comforting light of escapism and the crushing weight of reality's darkness, about knowing when to keep the light on and knowing when to go dark. The final moments of Clair Obscur expertly displays these themes in a striking manner by using its truest art form to its strength, the interactivity of being a video game. By designing an experience like this, you are mastering complex technology in the service of art. Video games are an amalgamation of music, architecture, gameplay, cinema, programming, design, writing, poetry, dancing, animation, acting, philosophy, and now painting. Clair Obscur fulfills this loop of human artistry by using the strengths of being a video game in the pursuit to replicate a living, breathing painting. It's a deliberate conversation between centuries of French art history, and it uses gameplay and storytelling as a brush and canvas. The game is about grief. You see it in the story, but you feel it in the gameplay. It paints with this idea of controlling fake people. The prologue convinces you to care for these characters. You get a taste of it when you play as Sophie, but you begin to understand it more intimately when Gustave is ripped away from you. By the time the game makes you choose the natural way of life or the sweet escape of a fantasy, it can be hard to make the correct choice, which speaks to the final artistic movement Clair Obscur embodies: Romanticism. Romanticism is an artistic era that emphasizes the individual, the irrational, the imaginative, the emotional, and the visionary. Think of the natural goodness, spontaneity, and logic of a child. How they can be so unapologetically creative in the face of a sterile adult world full of rules and rationality. It's arguably the most pure form of a human being, and it's the purity of childlike wonder that initially shapes the world we explore in Clair Obscur. The world is a piece of fiction that has been horrifically twisted beyond its original purpose. In the real world, Verso and his sister Clea created this land as children. In the search of fun, adventure, and creativity, they manifested joyful companions in childlike geography. For instance, Esquier appears to be modeled after one of Verso's childhood toys as an endless well of support and hope, like an imaginary friend that finds himself in a physical realm. Monoko and Noko are both representations of dogs that Verso owned outside of the canvas, and the greater Gestural race as a whole acts like many jovial dogs you'll find throughout the real world. However, despite the canvas being made by two siblings, only one of them really poured their soul into this painting. Many years later, Verso tragically dies in a house fire as a means of saving his younger sister Alicia, who escapes horrifically maimed. This event sends their mother Aline down a spiral as she irrationally hides herself in her child's painting as a means of coping. She begins to develop this romanticized version of her life within the canvas, tainting it with the industrialized Lumiere and implementing painted versions of her family members. In doing so, Aline paints in the cycle of human life, creating generations of painted people that create their own memories, feelings, and thoughts. Verso's father, Renoir, with no other means of getting through to his wife, enters the painting and attempts to destroy everything she has painted, with the help of his daughter, Clea. The painted people of Lumiere now find themselves in a state of being where they slowly gommage year by year, because an adult man values the cold, harsh truth of reality over the sweet escape of fantasy. It's hopeless and miserable, which are the exact feelings the game provokes from you time and time again. Alicia, with no will to live in the real world, seeks to defend and preserve Verso's canvas as it is, to ensure the lives of her friends remain prosperous, full of love and harmony, something they have fought so hard for and most definitely deserve. But selfishly, it's a means of coping. She romanticizes this life that has more meaning for her, a life as a god amongst men. Here, she has power, friendship, and her brother. But even though she grieves for her brother, she also grieves for the child that was lost within herself. But we have to ask, what about the child who is forced to paint? Why is Verso the only one in the story to ask what he wants? So much rests on the shoulders of someone who just wants to be let go, who's forced to work and keep this twisted childhood project alive, even though it's turned into something it was never supposed to be. A painting that has life, death, stories, culture. Who's to say what is and isn't real? Question is, how real is it to you? How Clair Obscur presents this dilemma is a damn good example of excellent storytelling. It cannot be said more plainly. It's up to you to decide whether or not it's right to damn the people of an entire world so a child could rest, or preserve it in spite of what he would want because the people you have come to know are real enough to you. Both are incredibly selfish choices that transcend the notion of what is right or what is wrong. It's about what feels right to you, but tragically, both avenues are incredibly depressing. The events that follow Verso's wish lets loose the cold, harsh truth of reality setting in, but Mael's ending is a romanticization of a world we've desperately wanted to see, ending in a nightmare. A black and white 4x3 style that locks you into your choice. It's claustrophobic, uncomfortable, and remarkably silent. So yeah, this is the greatest game ever made. How Clair Obscur manages to tell a story about people who live in a dream and pull it off in a way where it doesn't feel like wasted time is nothing short of brilliant. It's frustrating, but in a way where it leaves you wanting more, which is where all good art should leave you. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself by saying this, but it's crazy getting to live through one of these once-in-a-lifetime games that will always creep up into conversation. It's an industry-defining moment, the success of the underdog in spite of the odds, and the universal praise from all corners of the world. So thank you, Sandfall, for creating one of my now all-time favorite video games in a time of uncertainty, not only for the games industry, but for the rest of the world. Your game was a source of comfort for me when I looked at the harsh reality of things right now, and I can't help but feel grateful that I got to experience this game during my lifetime. So thank you, and thank you for watching my video. But wait, don't go yet. There are lots of podcasts out there. Too many, in fact, which is why I decided to make my own. Introducing Code Cleric, a gaming podcast hosted by me, Landon Hansen, and my friend and fellow creator, Asid Enjum.
You know how like H.P. Lovecraft would see all this like crazy shit around him and that's what he would put into writing? He must have seen like Oblivion. He saw that shit as a kid. He was like, oh my god, dude. Todd Howard came to him in his nightmares.
Todd Howard's petting his cat. He's like, oh, you have a nice cat. What's your cat's name?
Topics range from our biggest disappointments with games to exploring video game hot takes, but my personal favorite so far is our episode all about gaming urban legends.
After some further information gathering, it was revealed to be the brother of Notch, the game's developer. I personally emailed Notch and asked him if he had a brother. It took him a while, but he emailed me back with a very short message. I did, but he is no longer with us. Notch.
So please, if you're looking for more content from me in the meantime, check it out. Get on the ground floor of a new podcast that doesn't have over 1 billion episodes yet. Once again, thank you for watching. You are the best, and I hope you have a lovely day.